Welcome to Congregation Va-Dor's Touch of Torah. This week, Rabbi Barry is on vacation, and we are lucky enough to have Andrew Susman, educator and Cantorial Spiritual Leader, with us, who brings not only a touch of Torah, but a touch of music. And we're thrilled to have him tonight. Tonight, our parsha is Numbers, Shalach Lecha. Take it away, Andy.
Well, thank you. As always, I'd like to thank you, Sharon, and Rabbi Barry for giving me this opportunity. I enjoy talking about Torah, all things Judaica. And I'd like to begin with a medley of some Torah tunes. So one of my most favorite is Al Shlosha Devarim. Al Shlosha Devarim. Al Shlosha Devarim Ha'olam Omed. The whole world stands on three things. Count them. 1, 2, 3. The whole world stands on three things. Al Shlosha Devarim Ha'olam Omed. On Torah and on prayer and on deeds of loving kindness. Al HaTorah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al gemilut chasadim. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe, Morasha, Kehilat Yaakov, Morasha, Kehilat Yaakov, Morasha, Kehilat Yaakov, Torah, Tziva lanu Moshe, Yisrael, Yisrael, Le'oraita, Chadhu, Torah, Ora, Torah, Ora, Hallelujah. Torah, Ora, Torah, Ora, Hallelujah. It is a tree of life to those who hold fast to it, and all of its supporters are happy. Shalom, 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 shalom. And I got one more for now. Sweet as honey, sweet as honey, sweet as honey on our tongue. Sweet as honey, sweet as honey, sweet as honey on our tongue. Let us soak it up, let it all sink in. Sweet words of Torah. Let us soak it up, let it all sink in. Sweet words of Torah. Sweet as honey, sweet as honey, sweet as honey on our tongue. Well, welcome to A Touch of Torah and Music. And tonight we are going to discuss the portion Shalach Lecha. It is the 37th portion, the fourth portion of the book of Bamidbar. And I don't know if you read the promo, this little text that I provided, but I believe I put in there something to the effect that the title, Shlach Lecha, has a interesting, familiar ring, probably to everyone here, because there's another portion, the third portion, from the first book, Lech Lecha. And so I want to begin with that as our opening frame, and then we'll keep talking. So here we go. So Lech Lecha is when God speaks to Avram and Sarai and says, go to yourself. Lech Lecha, go to yourself. And so basically that narrative is about when Avram and Sarai are leaving their family community and heading west to Canaan. And so they were beginning a journey. And the deal is that they were successful. They found new identities. They started a new faith. And of course, we know that they were promised to be as numerous as the stars, the descendants in the promised land. And that's a great place to start, because as we fast forward to this portion, 4 books later, and dozens of parshiot, we are now at shlach lecha, which means send for yourself. And what's the story? Well, I sent you guys some links to some commentaries. I included a short video which gives you a brief synopsis of the portion. So this portion is where the spies, Moses, they're wandering in the desert, and they're about ready to scout out the promised land to see what's there and plan ahead for conquest of the land. So what we now know is of the 12 spies that were sent, only 2 had a much more favorable report about what awaited. The two spies, the 2 scouts, were Caleb and Joshua. So the outcome of that narrative is that the Jewish people did not proceed to conquer the land at that juncture. They would wander for another 37, 38 years until the generation that had been slaves passed on, and a new generation was born that was more familiar with freedom. And so that's the essence of this tonight's discussion. And so before I start, I would love to hear any little anecdotes before we get going. I'm going to share the first 2 commentaries that I shared with you. If you read them, that's great. If you didn't, we're going to go over them now and have a conversation. Anybody have anything to share before we get started? Go, Sharon.
I don't like to call them spies. I like to call them scouts. And
I
you
agree
use
with
both
you.
words. You use both words. I know the video used the word spies. I like to call them scouts because that's what they were doing. They went out and they were checking everything out. I wouldn't call them, they weren't really spying on what was happening. So I don't know why they interpret that as
Good.
spies.
That's a great observation, and I totally concur with your assessment. That's why I kind of used both terms just now. They're scouting it out, taking a check, an inventory of what was ahead, and so all sorts of interesting things to share. But before I get started, like I said, I want to hear if you've got some opening comments about my first tee off there. Anybody read up on it? No. Okay. So here's the deal. I get it that you guys are busy, but half the fun of studying Torah is studying Torah. Take 15 minutes even. The video is 4 minutes. It takes about 10 minutes to read each commentary. So 25 minutes, 30 minutes, you're good to go, and you can be somewhat conversant in each week. So even if you read one, so whatever. Okay, so last call. Any comments, observations of the week? Some nachas. Okay, so on that note, I am going to well, before I screen share, I want to share something that I do not have a document to show you. This is a book I've shared with you before. Turn it. Great 3, 4-page synopses of portions, another commentary, sometimes overlaps with stuff I'm sharing with you. And so I'm going to reference some verses he's highlighted. So Rabbi Jonathan Kligler, a Reconstructionist rabbi, one of the bigwigs in the Reconstructionist movement, about to retire for the second time. He came back. He retired before the pandemic and decided that it was not a good time to transition, and came back to shepherd the synagogue for a few more years. Anyway, so shlach lecha means send for yourself. So his title says healing the crushed spirit, and one of the commentaries addresses that. But he opens up with a verse, and the verse reads as follows in English from Numbers, from this: "We looked like grasshoppers to ourselves, so we certainly must have looked that way to them." So there was apparently a confidence problem about how strong they were, or how fortified they were, or how intimidating the fortifications were. They just didn't feel that they were up to the task. And so, basically, the essence of his summary here is that many times we're all in that boat. We lack confidence, we undersell, we underestimate our capabilities. And if you don't think you can, you're right. Or, basically, you end up, it's like self-defeating prophecy. So he shared a number of verses. I just want to throw them out just as reference points. So Numbers chapter 13:33 is the one I just read for you. We looked like grasshoppers to ourselves, and certainly we must have looked that way to them. Now, one of the things that when you study Torah, which kind of that was one of my problems. I get lost. It's like going to Home Depot. One thing leads to another, to another. You don't want to leave the store because you're so inspired. So what happens is, like I began, this portion has a connection to a portion, other ones, in particular from a title alone, Lech Lecha, the opening gambit with Abraham and Sarah. So here's a verse from also from Numbers a little later. We're going to die. If only we had died in Egypt. Let's turn around and head back. That was the mindset that's conveyed in this portion. There you have it. So that's another one from Numbers. But then he goes back to Exodus. But the people would not listen to Moses, their spirits crushed by cruel bondage. So this yoke, we're carrying this stuff on our back, this slave mentality is nothing new. We had it in Exodus, we had it in Leviticus, we now have it in Numbers, and I will tell you that the Shema and the Ve'ahavta only appear once in the book of Deuteronomy. And the book of Deuteronomy was actually a later addition precisely because of that constantly doubting. And so Deuteronomy was like a reprise of all the things that we needed to pay attention to. Anyway, let me read one or two more verses here. Let's see. So that was Exodus. Here is one from Leviticus, and it reminds us to have faith. And it's Leviticus 26:13. I, the Lord your God, or the term that Rabbi Kligler uses, life unfolding, am your God who brought you out of Egypt to be slaves no more, who broke the bars of your yoke so you might walk erect. Okay. And that's, once again, that's the essence of his thrust there, that our spirits were crushed. We were not up to the task of moving forward with that campaign. Now, let me screen share. Anybody want to share anything before I start? Keep going. Yes, Sharon.
I wanted to share that a lot of the parshas, the Israelites or the Jewish people are always kvetching.
That's why your joke was perfect.
Yeah, I
Tell your
know,
joke
right?
again for anybody that missed it.
Okay, so well, that's okay. We'll do it later.
No, say it.
But they always are kvetching. In last week's parsha, they were kvetching because they didn't have enough food, and then manna came down, and they're kvetching because it's not hearty enough of a meal. And then he gives them more meat, and it's too much, And before they're constantly kvetching, they don't have this, they don't have that, Oh, we came out of Egypt for this? Why? Why did we come out of Egypt? We had a good job. We were working. We had a place to sleep. Now we're wandering in the desert for 40 years and 40 nights, 40 years and 40 years of nights. So yeah, it's just not just the ones that you've read. There's a lot of kvetching going on.
That's why I want you to say that joke again, that baseball joke.
All right. So the joke is that two Jewish men go into a bar mitzvah, and the one says to the other, I used to be on a Jewish baseball team. And the other says, oh, that was great. What position did you play? He says, oh, I was catcher.
Betcha. Beautiful. Love it. Okay, so let me screen share. Let's get started here. Oh God. Let's try. Good luck. Let's try that. Yep. Thank goodness for that. Okay. So I got to make it larger. I get that. There we go. Make it larger. Boom, boom. Can you all see where it says the perils of groupthink?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So I would like to sit here for a minute and let's look at the title and the subtitle, and I'm going to set you up for what's coming. So the perils of groupthink, Rabbi Asher Lopatin. The story of the spies offers an object lesson in the importance of diversity and the danger of homogeneity. Okay, so I think we can see up front that if 10 people are creating this narrative, it's a very difficult road to hoe for the other two to pierce that wall of negativity and so forth. Now, while you're mentioning Israel and the different situations in Israel today, we're all familiar, some of us are familiar, the various wars they fought. And I remember one of the hallmarks of being a leader in battle, in particular, paying attention to the 6-Day War or the Yom Kippur War, is keeping the soldiers occupied on what it is they need to be doing. Don't let them think too much about what the enemy they're up against. Just what is their job, and do that. Because if they think about the odds, the number of enemy versus them, or they're undergunned or whatever, they would probably be fearful, do their jobs less effectively, and the outcome is not necessarily a good one. And I remember some of that narrative playing out, hearing stories about that in the 6-Day War or in the Yom Kippur War, because at different times it was tough road to hoe, and you had to keep the guys focused until boom, we successful. Okay, so the word group think. I've had some experience with that. We all do actually. So I want to throw out some talking points here that will set up reading the actual commentary. We're all familiar with, and I want you to unmute because I want you to. I don't want it to all come from me. Let's begin with the Titanic. Who wants to just say something that the outcome of the Titanic was the result of groupthink? And if you're not sure what groupthink is, I'll define it. You need a definition of groupthink? I'll read it for you. Here we go. Groupthink. Groupthink is a phenomenon that occurs when a group of well-intentioned people make irrational or non-optimal decisions spurred by the urge to conform, or the belief that dissent is not allowed or impossible. The problematic or premature consensus characteristic of groupthink may be fueled by a particular agenda, or may be due to a group of members valuing harmony and coherence above critical thought. Now, I've got some interesting things to share about that, but before I do, I'd like you to, anybody, the Titanic is a perfect starting point about that word. So who remembers some of the details about how the Titanic ended up where it did, possibly or definitely because of the problem of groupthink?
Well, I think the captain of the Titanic, trying to get across the Atlantic in record time to beat out the competition, because he had so many business people, he took the type of a route and took chances that would have ordinarily been against one's better judgment. The speed, the time, the location, the route that he took. He had warnings that there were icebergs. He didn't take any precaution. He just thought that they were invincible. And I think he
Beautiful.
was spurred on by the very, very wealthy passengers who were on that ship to make him rise to that level of competency that he actually didn't have.
That was exquisitely said and framed, Valerie. Thank you for that. Anybody else want to add another detail or two about the Titanic? Aside from the captain, he was not the only person. He was certainly responsible almost exclusively for the accident, but he wasn't responsible exclusively for the fact that so many people died. That was another element of groupthink. So what else? Okay, so here's the deal. In my studies of Wikipedia or researching, there were 16 chambers that were keeping this boat afloat. It could stay afloat if 6 were still uncompromised. But unfortunately, or if 6 were uncompromised, but apparently there were too many compromised and it couldn't stay afloat. Or no, let me flip that. It could stay afloat if only 4 were damaged, but actually 6 were compromised, and it couldn't sustain all that weight. Okay. Anybody else? Any other detail about things we've learned over the years? Okay. Apparently,
didn't they have? Valerie makes mention of the super wealthy, but weren't there lesser status people also who were mistreated?
right. Well, there were first class, second class, and steerage class, third class. And yes, the third class people got the biggest hit of deaths because they were, we got the short end, the short straw in terms of getting into the lifeboats, but also in terms of their discipline of filling the lifeboats. Many lifeboats were not full, so the number of deaths could have easily been less if they had properly loaded those boats. They had plenty of time. The boat took over 2 hours to sink. It wasn't like in 15 minutes or something, which sometimes that happens. But they didn't do the right thing. Anyway, so there's the issue there. But I'm going to bring up something else that's going to bring chills up our spines because this is stuff that we live through. The space shuttle. And the space shuttle was even more vivid because many of us saw it on TV. Okay, so first question, what were the names of those 2 space shuttles that had issues?
The Challenger was the one, Challenger, and the
Enterprise?
no, it wasn't Enterprise.
I'm going to wait. I'll wait for somebody. I'll tell you what. I'll give you a hint. District of
Columbia.
So the Challenger blew up 18 seconds after launch. Pretty simple rubric. Do not launch below freezing. Now, freezing, what altitude? 1,000 feet? 3,000 feet? The bottom line was they are well aware that that was a faux pas. They should have waited another hour or 2 or scrubbed it. But the pressure was on. The world was watching. They had a science teacher. They had a full crew. They were excited. And it launched, and it was a terrible thing. A day that will live in infamy. And the crazy thing is I have a cousin who's married to someone who was in the Navy at the time, and he spent over a month combing the coastline of Cape Canaveral, that shoreline, looking for debris as they were doing the Transportation Safety Board or whatever they do after an accident. So that was that little thing. And then the Columbia, so that was in January of 1986. Okay. The Columbia didn't blow up, it melted. It imploded, it melted. At launch, there were significant more heat tiles falling off than usual. And at the end of the 2 or 3 week stay up in the space station, I'm a little concerned that why did they send back the entire crew if they actually had to bring that ship back for better or for worse, couldn't you have left 3 or 4 astronauts back to hedge your bet? So that's my concern. So anyway, comes back, it re-enters the Earth, over the Pacific, crosses California, enters Texas airspace, and somewhere over Texas, it all went south, and the debris field was all over Texas. And that was in February of 2003. And those were not really accidents. They certainly were tragedies, but the details of the signals, the data were red flags flashing, red lights flashing. Something else needed to have been done, but once again, groupthink goes south. So that's my opening gambit on groupthink. But before we move on, does anybody else have a interesting example of groupthink that I've not mentioned?
Well, look at this school shooting in Texas. Now they come up today and say the police were in the building and they could have struck the shooter within 3 minutes, but they didn't. They were waiting for a key to unlock the classroom, and then today they discovered the classroom was already open. They didn't need a key. So all those 19 kids were killed for almost no reason other than the shooter. Had the police acted properly, they would have maybe survived.
And once again, even if the door was locked, the shooter may not have known it was locked, and they could have created a disturbance that outside the door to perhaps give one of the teachers a chance to intervene from inside. Okay, another thing for groupthink, Sharon?
January 6th, possibly. And many of the things, political parties and all that, people I don't want this to get into politics, but a lot of times with politics, people do not want to read between the lines or read what's right on the blackboard, and they want to just go with the crowd, go with the group think. Whatever guy is in power, he's the best or he's the worst, or and January 6th, I think, never should have happened, but it did.
Very good. I mean, certainly there was plenty of traffic on social media. And I mean, anybody could have told them what's going to happen. How could you not have a strike force in waiting just in case? Okay. And then one more that comes to mind, weapons of mass destruction. Remember those? Iraq? Okay. So, having said that, let's move on. So, I'm going to ask people to read. I'll read the first thing and then we'll move on. So, the commentary is, perhaps the most nagging question in this parsha is what went wrong. Parashat Shlach Lecha tells the story of the scouts, who were dispatched by Moses to investigate the land of Israel. Now, when you see these brackets, that's stuff that I've inserted. The land of Israel. It was not the land of Israel yet. It was Canaan, aka the future land of Israel. Prior to its capture by the Israelites, but the scouts return with a report that frightens the people. I share with you their fear, refusing to go forth and take the land as God commanded. Stanley, would you read in the version?
In the version of the story related in Deuteronomy 1.22, the blame for the fiasco is put on the Israelites, who pressured Moses to send a group of spies, what's the new word?
Scouts.
Scouts to inspect the promised land instead of simply going in and conquering it. But in the version of the story related in Parshat Shalach Lecha, it is Moses who chooses the scouts, all leaders of the people, and sends them on their mission.
All right, so right away, the fact that they're giving two narratives, the question is, are they trying to muddy the waters just to give all the options, all the reasons, take the blame off the people a little bit, and let Moses be the one to take more of the heat? He's got broad shoulders, he could take it. And remember, he's the one who doesn't get to go in the promised land anyway. So, anyway, okay, continue on. Irene, do you want to read, please? So how did this hand pick?
Moment. You wanted me to read?
Irene, can you read?
No, I have somebody here I can't read right now.
Okay, no worries. Okay, Harris, do you want to try to read? So how did this hand pick group?
I unmuted you.
I have the pictures covering up half of the some of the
All right,
reading.
Valerie.
I can read. So how did this hand-picked group of leaders go so bad? Give up their faith in God and pervert the will of the people. Moreover, how did the people, just months after building the tabernacle and experiencing God's presence in their midst, not to mention having not long before received the Torah and a rebuke for the building of the golden calf, succumb so easily to the negative report of the onlookers?
The spies. Well, keep in mind, anybody want to venture to give an analysis of why they might have been defaulting to that, to their fear? Okay,
Well, I think there might have been a lot of non-believers also.
There you go. That's one way. But if this was the generation scarcely 2 years before that crossed the Sea of Reeds with the Pharaoh's army in pursuit, they certainly escaped the jaws of death, not only from the sea not closing in on them, but the Pharaoh's troops not catching them. But they were probably thinking, I don't want to test fate. I don't want to go up against another military entity if I don't have to. Let's just stay where we are and eat and stay under our vine and fig tree. Anyway, okay, let's continue. Who else is here? Oh,
hello, I can read now.
Okay,
Okay.
go for it. There are
psychological and political answers to these questions, but they are not even hinted at in the text, which tells us only that God concludes that the people lack the faith necessary to enter the land. But that doesn't quite make sense either, since several verses later, the people appear to change their minds and decide they do not want to enter the land after all. Yet, by then, it's too late. And Moses tells the people not to attempt to conquer the land, and they will be defeated miserably.
Okay, so once again, they have doubts. They don't want to do it. And then after Moses rebukes them, he says, okay, we'll do it. Too late. Sorry. That ship has sailed. Now, truth be told, did the ship sail? Did God say you can't? No, I believe Moses was aware they're not up to it. Even if they think they found their cojones, which is a Spanish word for Moses said, no, we're not doing it. We're done. You're going to pass on. We'll wait for the next generation. So having said that, there's a reference to a minion, and I'll fast forward it to you because we have time. But it talks about the 10 scouts that gave a negative report as a subset of the Jewish people, an evil nation, and you can juxtapose that to the concept of a minion, which is not an evil nation. It's a holy gathering that we elevate all the time. A minyan. As a matter of fact, I would love if we could at least have a minyan each week when you do your Torah talk. So if you guys could recruit a few extra people, I would appreciate that. So on that note, so the concept of minyan is instructive. That is one of our inheritances from our Torah. And if you want to go back to back in the first book, in the book of Bereshit, there's a story where the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and Abraham, his first reaction is, wait a minute, God, my nephew Lot lives there. Let me save him and his family. But on his way to that town, he has an argument with God. He's, wait a minute, there are more righteous people than just my nephew. Can you spare the town? And a midrash ensues that maybe if there's 50 people, you won't destroy it, or 40 or 30. And then, of course, they settle on the number 10. But once again, the town was so bad that there weren't even 10 righteous people. But that was where the construct of a minyan was born in our tradition. So let's see what else. Then we'll move on to the next narrative. All right. Let's go to the last one. Parashat Shlach Lecha is a warning about the dangers of too much unity of thought. Let us work on bringing the stranger not only into the community, but into our thinking. Let us embrace difference in order to thrive as a people and thrive in the land. And so what he said earlier was the importance of welcoming the stranger, welcoming the convert, allowing our demographic to be enriched by difference. We don't have to be all the same. Look, we are progressive Jews all gathered here. We're not Orthodox. We're not really even conservative. We're a flavor of the progressive arm, and because we believe in diversity. Okay, so having said that, let me move on to the next explanation, which I really like a lot. And this is the sin of the spies. What exactly did the spies do wrong? And let's find that out. So once again, an iconic picture of the scouts returning from their reconnaissance mission. You have this huge cluster of grapes, so huge that it takes two people to carry it like that. Okay, that's a classic picture. All right. So let's circle back to Sharon. Would you please read, Sharon, when Moses.
When Moses
Wait, let me make it larger. Sorry
Okay.
about that. Okay.
When Moses sends the scouts to survey the land of Canaan, he gives them a list of very specific things to investigate. He charges them, go up there into the Negev and on into the hill country. See what kind of country it is. Are the people who dwell in it strong or weak, few or many? Is the country in which they dwell good or bad? Are the towns they live in open or fortified? Is the soil rich or poor? Is it wooded or not? 12 emissaries go out and return after 40 days, reporting on what they saw in this exotic new land. All but 2 of the scouts are punished later. Victims of a plague, they die in the wilderness.
Okay, now that last little narrative there, I never actually knew that. We did know that the generation passed, but not specifically from a plague, not specifically being punished and an abrupt end. So that's a little wrinkle that interesting. But first off, I made sure I wanted to get to the second commentary so Sharon would get her wish. We use the word scouts, they use the word emissaries, and I think those are richer than just this negative connotation of a spy. So thank you, Sharon, for pushing that narrative forward. Real quick, though, I want to remind us this rabbi or Cantor just say wolf. Okay, is the author of this essay.
But I have a question for you.
Sure,
Why,
sure.
if they were doing what they were told to do by whether it's Moses or God or who, the leaders of their, constituencies, whatever, why are they being punished? They were following their directives.
Okay,
So
they were
why are they being
good.
punished?
That's good. That's good. And Jose begins addressing that at the very beginning. So let's keep going here. So what is their sin? According to our tradition, Stanley, they sin by
They sin by not trusting God's vision and not having faith. How long will this people spurn me? And how long will they have no faith in me, despite all the signs that I have performed in their midst? Furthermore, they sin because they cause the whole community to mutter against him, meaning Moses, by spreading
calumnies or negative
calumnies
slanderings.
about the land.
Okay, so this is coming specifically from the portion. I had read a verse earlier from Rabbi Klegler's thing that all this negative energy, we shouldn't do it, don't go, it's going to be terrible, blah, blah, blah. Okay, and then Cantor Wolf begins her response, the nature of their sin. So, Harris, do you want to give it a shot? I question.
Okay, I question not only the nature of their sin, but also Moses' approach to their mission. Moses' instructions divide the world into either or categories that ignore the nuance within a complex reality. Instead of asking such specific questions, what if I had said to them, when you return, tell us what you see. How did you experience this new place? What was the land like? How were the people? Perhaps these kind of open-end questions would have led the scouts to bring back a different report. At least these sorts of instructions might have given them more room to develop their own stories in a less dualistic fashion. The scouts might have been inspired to bring back a different description of what they saw.
So holding on to that, if we riff on something that Sharon said about January 6th, a day that will live in infamy, another day, yet another day, that this country is divided, certainly, but part of that division is the way things are framed, black or white, and there's not nuance in people's ability. That people are not seeing gray. It's black or white, good or bad, better or worse. So the thing is that life is complicated and it's nuanced, and that's what Jose Wolf is pointing out. So perhaps Moses made a big faux pas by asking absolute, left or right questions instead of letting it be more subjective. Because what happened is you end up with two camps, those that liked it and those that didn't like it. If it was a more nuanced answers, you'd have a whole spectrum of responses, and you would never have that critical mass of one camp versus another camp. You'd have a gradation of perspectives. So that's a lesson for all of us, how we frame questionnaires, the expectations we have about anything. Do we want a black and white response or, the spectrum? Okay, so let's continue. Or is it simply a matter of perspective? After all, the 12 emissaries all observed and experienced the same things, yet two of them return with an account entirely different from the others. What is it that enables Joshua and Caleb to see the promised land through different eyes? Now, this next one's really interesting. So, let's see here. Who wants to read? Valerie? In his book, The Courage to Create, Rollo May writes,
We are called upon to do something new, to confront a no man's land, to push into a forest where there are no well-worn paths and from which no one has returned to guide us. This is what existentialists call the anxiety of nothingness. To live into the future means to leap into the unknown, and this requires a degree of courage for which there is no immediate precedent and which for people to realize. He asserts that if you do not express your own original ideas, if you do not listen to your own being, you will have betrayed yourself. Also, you will have betrayed our community in failing to make your contribution to the whole.
Okay. So I'm going to pause right here for a minute. I'm going to go back to the title of the portion, Shalach Lecha, send for yourself, going back, way back to Bereshit, to Lech Lecha, go to yourself, and so find yourself. And the idea is, don't suppress your identity. Don't silence your voice. Allow your voice to be heard. Allow yourself to contribute to the community. That's what a minyan is about. Each person has agency. Each person is a voice. We need to step forward and speak. And you know that quote by Gandhi: be the blank you wish the world to be. What's the quote exactly? Who remembers? Okay. Well, be the world you wish to see. In other words, if you want the world to be different, you need to model that behavior. So, having said that, further down, by not validating or using your voice, you are being unholy. You are committing sacrilege. And I'm going to sing for you a song that talks about that. So let me stop screen share. Okay, so this song is called I Am Alive. When we wake up in the morning, I want you to look in the mirror and I want you to see this image coming back. Each of us is created in the image of God. And it goes like this. I am alive. I am alive. I am alive. I am alive. Okay, so let's all say, I am alive.
I am alive. I
Beautiful.
muted it. I muted
That's okay.
everybody.
That's okay. They can say it behind
Okay.
their muted screen. You represented. Now, after you say that opening chorus, the next line is, and who is this aliveness I am? And who is this aliveness I am? And who is this aliveness I am? Is it not the Holy Blessed One? So if we're going to honor God's creation, if we're going to glean the essence from today's Torah portion, we have to speak, allow our voice to be heard. Do not succumb to groupthink. Do not be victims of a bifurcated, dualistic questionnaire that doesn't allow for nuance, and black and white doesn't really work. Think about this. We could get a little into the more contemporaneous conversation now. Not much time to go, but the rainbow flag is representative of the LGBTQ community. But more than that community, it's representative of the heterosexual community as well. The idea is that respect difference. Acknowledge there's difference. And I know this is a little bit cliche or trite, narrow. I'm a lefty, and many of you, even older than I am, may remember when you were forced to be righty. Now, that's a pretty mild thing compared to gender or sexuality, but it is representative of intolerance. And so imagine the narrowness that we were forcing people that were lefty to be righty. There was something wrong. We needed to fix it. But there's nothing wrong. that things may have gone wrong if they were suppressing their hand dominance and they couldn't write properly or something like that. But in sports, there are lefty pitchers, there are lefty golfers, yada yada. So whose crazy harebrained idea and groupthink to perpetuate that we had to suppress left-handedness? How much worse to suppress something that is of much greater consequence? So anyway, so anybody else want to weigh in about what we've shared tonight? Yes, Harris, unmute and jump right in.
Go ahead, Harris. I unmuted you.
Okay, I have a Titanic joke. I don't know if I told it. So did I tell you the Titanic joke? Okay, a Jewish guy and a Chinese guy were in a restaurant. The Jewish guy gets up and smashes the Chinese guy in the face. What'd you hit me for? Pearl Harbor. He says, that wasn't a Chinese, that was a Japanese. And the Jewish guy says, Japanese, Chinese, what's the difference? Half hour later, the Chinese guy gets up and hits the Jewish guy. What'd you hit me for? The Titanic. The Jewish guy says, that was an iceberg. The Chinese guy says, iceberg, Goldberg, what's the difference?
Wow, that's the most politically incorrect joke, but you were equal opportunity.
Okay.
You were slamming everybody.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, anybody else?
Yeah, I just want to apologize for being here, but not being here. Okay, my mom's got the TV really loud, and I'm trying to concentrate on what's going on here. And I told her to lower the TV. Now she's on the phone.
No
so
worries. You can't go to your bedroom and kind of hide out?
Well, I could, but here's the thing, this is a very comfortable chair.
Okay, all right. Well, you represent the commissioners in Egypt. The chair is too comfortable.
Yeah.
Thanks, Eileen, for being with
Eileen,
us.
thank you for being so candid. We would have loved to have you read, but now I understand why you were quiet. You had to mute your mic.
I didn't want to like in the middle of reading, then I hear, hey,
Thank you, but glad
Thank
you're
you,
here.
Eileen.
Alan, any insights to share?
No, sorry, Andy.
Okay, thank you.
I-
So, Sharon?
I was thinking when you were talking about just a few seconds ago, when you were talking about all these different things, I was considering when we were growing up and blacks were asked to go to the back of the bus. They weren't allowed to drink from the water fountains that we were allowed to drink from. They weren't allowed to eat in restaurants that we were allowed to eat in. And
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
and it never made sense to me as a child, and it still doesn't make sense to me as a grown up. But one of these days somebody's going to come around and it'll be changed. Maybe.
Harris, 1 second, real quick. So speaking of that mindset, an amazing film I saw last week called News of the World. I don't know if anybody's seen it. It's with Tom Hanks. We're all familiar with Dances with Wolves. For me, it's this generation's Dances with Wolves. And I won't spoil it for you, but what it's about is a child that he comes across. And this child has a lot of trauma. And the end of the basic essence of the story is it's the story of America. And Tom Hanks ends up being the guardian of this child, and the story is gonna unfold, and it could be done today. It takes place mostly in Texas, and the turmoil in Texas after the Civil War. Some things never change, and so I highly recommend the film News of the World.
Where is it, on Netflix?
One of the cable channels. I don't know which one we watched it on. Yeah. It was in the theaters like a year or two ago, but of course, from the pandemic, I wasn't going to a theater. Okay, thank you, Sharon. Yeah, right. So back to non-inclusiveness. We could do a whole bunch of films about that. Driving Miss Daisy, where Morgan Freeman was, the driver, but was treated like a, second or third class citizen, and the insights into that world. And even today, I mean, there's still stuff going on today that you scratch your head and say, how could it be? So,
Go ahead,
Harris?
Okay, we have a lot of anti-Semitism going on today, as you know. But nothing compared to me growing up in the 50s, okay, where Jews couldn't get into Ivy League schools. They had quotas for Jews to get into medical schools. They had Jews couldn't work for major companies. Jews couldn't work for banks. Okay, it was horror. And I have a quick story to tell you. I came from a poor family and I had to get a job right away, and a bank had an opening for trainees. So I went and I ran down to the bank, and the guy that interviewed me went to West Catholic. I went to Overbrook with Will Chamberlain. We played West Catholic for the public league for the city championship, and we lost to the Catholic League with Will Chamberlain. That's all we did was talk about the game. We were both at the game. He takes my application, gives it to the boss, comes back and says, I can't hire you. That's anti-Semitism was unbelievable back in the 50s. I played with tennis players that went to medical school in Alabama and in Georgia and all because they couldn't get into school in the North. And that's the way it was in the 50s. So today it's chopped liver compared to what it used to be. Ford never hired Jews. Ford was Hitler's hero. But Ford eventually had a CEO that was Jewish. So now it's okay for the Jews. This is small stuff that's going on now. Right?
Anybody else before we wrap it up? So once again, in a nutshell, shlach lecha, send for yourself. Don't silence your voice. Find it, use it, speak your mind, contribute. Be an active member of your community. You're here tonight. Thank you very much. And speak, contribute. The current community will be richer. The future will be richer. And let's not succumb to groupthink. And diversity will ultimately yield a better outcome.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So
before we sign off, and before you do that song, I know I said this earlier and some of you weren't on, but on June 10th, and Rabbi Barry, on behalf of Congregation LaDor Va-Dor, put a lawsuit together with the state of Florida, and it is against the abortion law that is to go into effect for in July 1st, 2022, that states that any pregnancy cannot be aborted after 15 weeks. I'm very proud of Rabbi. I'm proud to be part of LaDor Va-Dor, fighting for women's rights, speaking up and speaking out on this very important topic. So I think it blends in very nicely into Shalach Lecha and what you've said tonight, Andy, that Rabbi Barry chose to stand up for what he feels is right. And we are getting support from all over America and Canada, even from England. And people are making donations to us. We have a possibility of a grant coming to fruition from California. Unfortunately, people like the National Council on Jewish Women, the National Organization of Women, Planned Parenthood, ADL, none of them chose to be on this lawsuit with LaDor Va-Dor. They were too nervous. At the last minute, they dropped out. They're supporting what Rabbi's doing, but they just didn't have the kahunas, as Andy said before, to go through with it and put their names on the lawsuit. And we are being applauded from here to there for our name being on that lawsuit. And I hope it comes to fruition that we can annihilate this new law.
So the song I want to close with is a familiar one to many of us, As We Bless. And the idea is, as we bless, reminds us to have faith in one another and in the higher power, as we bless the source of light and life. So we are blessed. And that perhaps was the sin of the scouts or the emissaries, to not have faith in one another, that they could say, and instead of saying impossible, they could say, I'm possible. So here we go. As we bless the source of light, so we are blessed. As we bless the source of life, so we are blessed. And the blessing gives us strength and makes our visions clear. And the blessing gives us peace in the courage to dare. As we bless the source of life, so we are blessed. As we bless the source of light, so we are blessed. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. And just also a reminder, tomorrow night, a very special program, which Sharon will plug right now.
Yes, I will. Tomorrow night, June 22nd, 2022, we have a song fest with songs of Leonard Cohen and Debbie Friedman, with Andy Susman and Carol Garrett leading us. All the words will be on the screen. You can sing along behind your muted windows unless they ask you to unmute. They'll be giving us some background on the songs and definitely about the musician artists. And I think it'll be a very exciting program. We're really looking forward to this. It was a program that was requested for a couple of months now, and Stanley gave us the incentive to push it forward and get a date for it. So I hope you all join us. Bring a friend, bring 2 or 3 friends, tell other people. It's on our website, and it's a Zoom, and the link is there. So bring everybody with you, and hopefully have a nice hour, maybe an hour and 10 minutes of fun singing. So thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you all for participating and standing up for what's right, and just letting us have this diversity each week, and about the Torah, and educating ourselves about our great book, our great 5 books of the Torah. Thank you.